Women Who Own It podcast spotlights women business owners who are pioneers in their field, setting trends, blazing trails, and creating game-changing innovations. Brought to you by WBENC, the largest certifier of women-owned businesses in the U.S. and a leading advocate for women business owners and entrepreneurs. And me, Allison Maslan. I've been a business owner for the last 35 years. I'm the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the book, Scale or Fail. So join our bold community of women who built it, grew it, and own it. I'll see you on the show. Welcome to the Women Who Own It podcast, brought to you by WBENC, the largest certifier of women-owned businesses. The Women Who Own It podcast is supported by Target, and the show is for women business leaders by women business leaders. I'm your host, Allison Maslan, and I'm founder of Pinnacle Global Network, where we mentor business owners around the world to scale their businesses. Now, I'm really excited today because I have Jane Mossbacker Morris, and she's the founder and CEO of To The Market, a company that connects businesses and consumers to ethically made products from around the world. Her business is super cool. You are going to love this interview. Her company has worked with Bloomingdales, Dillards, Target, and investors like Techstars and Farfetch. And in 2020, Fortune magazine named Jane one of the 25 world's greatest leaders. She's also the author of Buy the Change You Want to See. Use your purchasing power to make the world a better place. So happy to have you here, Jane.
Thank you, Allison. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, I really, like I was saying before we started, I love the work that you're doing in your business. And I was reading your mission. We are on a mission to empower people, protect the planet, promote better business. And we do it without sacrificing speed, innovation, and digitization. Now, this is obviously a very mission-driven business. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to this mission with To The Market?
Well, I started my career focused on something very different, as so often we do. So I started my career working in the public sector. I was at the State Department. I was focused on actually national security, counterterrorism specifically. And I was working all over the world and came away with the conclusion that the most effective way to drive change was to try to leverage the private market. So really use market forces to create jobs, to sustain jobs. And that was, in fact, a really, really powerful way to have the impact I was trying to have from the public sector. So I pivoted a little bit. I went and did an MBA to study different economies, specifically in the developing world, to understand, gosh, where could I start a business? How could I start, how could I add value? And found retail manufacturing. Retail manufacturing is not an industry I thought I would ever work in. I had worked in retail, as again, so many of us do, in high school. That was about the extent of my experience in retail. But what I found was that retail manufacturing was one of the largest economies in the developing world. It was one of the largest employers of women in the developing world. And yet it was an industry that was incredibly broken. It was opaque. It had almost no technology. It was environmentally destructive, and it had high risk of exploitation of the people actually working in the industry. And so I thought, surely there is a better way. So I eventually started To The Market with the vision of really transforming this industry to focus on empowering people and protecting the planet.
Yeah, that is just so fascinating. First of all, counterterrorism, and then what you're doing now. But I love how life works, right? Everything leads to that next right step. It's so fascinating and sad, actually, to find that an industry that we so rely on for our everyday products was so outdated, dangerous, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think What's so fascinating is that, here's an industry that is a very enjoyable industry. Retail therapy is real. It's fun to find, creations that people have designed and then have come to life. It's fun to walk into your closet and be able to, dress up and feel really good about yourself. And that's all really positive. What was really surprising to me was that there was a lot of pain sort of farther up in the supply chain that was being experienced by the people who are actually making a lot of the products. And so I thought, gosh, surely it doesn't have to be this way. There is so much opportunity given, the size of the market, and Americans in particular, we are, we love to shop, and that's a good thing for the economy. But I thought, gosh, couldn't we send our purchasing power to factories and to artisan groups that are really treating people in a dignified way? Why does it have to be made in a way that's more exploitative or putting the workers in danger or not allowing, some basic needs like access to use the restroom when we need to stand up and go to the bathroom while we're working on a line, like a assembly line. So I thought, okay, we are far enough in our evolution and technology where we don't need to rely on these crummy factories that aren't treating people well and don't care at all about the environment. We can still get competitive costs, but send the purchase orders from, American companies to suppliers that are really paying attention to the way that their employees are being treated and the footprint that they have on the environment.
Yeah, it's, oh my gosh, such important work that you're doing. I grew up in the retail business. My father had over 50 women's clothing stores across the country. So I grew up in that business. And, obviously we're not communicated that these kinds of things are going on, especially many years ago when it was.
Of course.
But I really hope what you're doing catches a fire to so many of the other brands and manufacturers, because I just feel like it is the time. There's no reason why these workers should be subjected to that kind of environment, I think it's good karma for the brand and everybody, right?
Absolutely. Everybody. You don't wear like a happy, dress that was made like with sadness. Like the energy continues associated with the product. So that's so fascinating about your family. I love that. We for so long had no idea how so many of the products that we were enjoying were being made. I mean, think about like the food and beverage industry, where for so long we didn't realize, the types of chemicals and genetically modified things that were going into our food. And then once we started learning more, we were like, oh gosh, like we could, there are opportunities and options when we can afford it to make different decisions that are probably better for us.
Yeah, 100%. Awareness is key, but then taking action, and that's really what you've done.
Totally.
People talk about it, but to do it is another story. So I would imagine that it's not been easy. Well, no business is easy.
Never is.
But it's been challenging to grow and scale. What have been some of the, we've got business owners that listen to this podcast, right? And so I think we can always learn from others' challenges and how they overcame them. What have been some of those big challenges that you've had to overcome to grow this business?
Yeah, I mean, I think scaling any organization is hard, especially from the ground up, whether that is building a business, whether that's building a nonprofit, whether that's building like a new product or division within an existing organization. If you're an entrepreneur, building without infrastructure is tough. For us, we've been really fortunate in that we have grown very quickly, but it has been largely because we have been relentlessly focused on a few sort of what we call key performance indicators, KPIs. So one is trying to decide what's more important to you in your business. Is it top line revenue or is it profitability? And making a strategic choice around what you will be rewarded for is really important, because you're going to make totally different decisions on whether you want to, for example, pursue a contract that has a big dollar amount associated with it, but is tight on margin. that would be something you would do if you're chasing top line and you're less focused on profitability. Whereas if you're focused more on profitability, you may be focused on, more deals that are smaller in nature but have bigger margin. And so getting really clear with yourself, if you have investors, and investors can certainly be like we have with venture capital, but it could also be, your spouse that you all are putting your savings in and you're having a conversation about how are we going to grow this business. It could be the bank that gave you an SBA loan. It, whoever it is that is helping you make financial decisions, or perhaps you are in communication with them because they have loaned you money, trying to decide what's that key performance indicator on profit versus revenue. Revenue is a really important piece. So that's sort of one. We decided revenue was more important to us because when you have venture capital, they're focused more on growth than they are on profitability. So that was something that we could clearly focus on. Second is deciding like what kind of revenue do I want to pursue. So there are all sorts of ways that all of us can make money. We can do consulting, we can have services that we offer, we can have sort of the core product that we sell be the bulk of the revenue, whether that's a class or it's a physical good. And trying to decide like what is the thing I'm going to focus on the most? Like what's the product set I'm going to put the most energy behind because it's going to either give me the most revenue or the most profit is also super important. So when we looked to the market, we are, again, ethical and sustainable sourcing and manufacturing, mostly for Fortune 1000 size companies. We had to decide, okay, we have expertise on our team that could absolutely go in and consult for these Fortune 1000 size companies. And that has very high margin, meaning like there's very low costs associated with it. You already have those folks on staff. Like, you can definitely make high margin sales, but the size of that contract is much smaller than if we're doing what our core business is, which is essentially called cost of goods plus, i.e. a client comes to us looking for a t-shirt. Our supplier might give it to us for $3. We are going to charge that client $4 for doing the sourcing and vetting and overseeing manufacturing. And so we had to decide that, okay, we have different revenue streams available to us. The ones that are most accretive and most important to our top line revenue, which is that most important thing we decided on, is going to be focused on sales of cost of goods plus, i.e. we want to sell Target or Macy's product. We don't want to sell them consulting. If somebody wants us to do consulting, we have to think really hard about whether that's worth it and whether it's going to lead to more product, because that's that key performance indicator. So deciding, profit versus revenue, and then deciding like what are those key, revenue streams that I'm going to focus on that are going to be most accretive to my goals, allows us to focus and focus and focus and allow for growth.
Yeah, I love that. That is so, because first of all, business owners can be so ADD, right?
Oh my God.
And
Totally.
you've got one opportunity comes here on Monday, and then Friday you're like wanting to go into a different direction.
100%.
So I think getting clear on those objectives, those KPIs is really important. And I love how you talked about the revenue and profit, and also how risk averse are you, and then also staying. I love what you're talking about, the consulting, right? And it's also valuable to stay the course, right? Because if you start splitting in too many directions, or let's say you start doing consulting, but then you get this big order and now you don't have enough bandwidth because you have employees doing these other projects.
Totally.
So lots of things to consider there, I think.
Sometimes it requires saying no, which is so hard because as a business owner, you're like, oh, I need like every dime I can get, every dime I can squeeze out. Like it's hard for me to say no, but just as you said, a brilliant example, like what if I say yes to three $5,000 contracts, which forces me to say no to a $30,000 contract. So really deciding like, okay, everything is about trade-offs. If I say yes to these things that are outside of my core focus area, what am I potentially saying no to? And, the short future that could be even more creative.
Act is
So
is
hard.
is so
Yeah.
big. Now, I love the title of your book, Buy the Change You Want to See, kind of like be the change you want to be in the world. Buy the change you want to see, use your purchasing power to make the world a better place. Tell us a little bit, because you just came out with the book not that long ago, right? So what do you want readers to walk away with from this book?
The goal of Buy the Change You Want to See was really just to spread the message that everybody can be involved in conscious consumerism. That it's not about one socioeconomic level. It's not about one political belief system. It's accessible to everybody if we define it as such. So the way that I think of it is, how do you use the spending, your discretionary spending, to be an extension of your values? And those values can differ, wildly. Allison, you might decide that, like, my most important value is I want to focus on supporting U.S. jobs. And so I'm going to make a commitment that 50% of the gifts that I buy over the holiday season are going to be made in America. Or it could be, I decide my most important value is that I want to support women-owned and operated businesses. So I'm going to commit that I'm going to buy 50% of my gifts over the course of the year. Think hostess gifts and home, home housewarming and baby gifts. I'm going to buy 50% of those from women-owned companies. So finding a value that's important to you, which can totally range depending on who you are. It could be everything from, again, the American made to the I want to support BIPOC businesses, or both. And then saying, what's something I spend money on that's discretionary? Oftentimes we have different budgets available to us depending on where we are in our life. Sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less, but there are things that we do have discretionary spending around. So deciding, okay, for the discretionary spending that I have, is there something I know I spend money on that I could commit to advancing my values through? And so that's really the intent of the book, is to simply provide examples of ways that we can drive change through voting with our wallet, and to remind folks that it's not just one political party, it's not just one socioeconomic group, and that you don't have to quit your job and, go serve as a volunteer to make a difference. You actually can make a difference by choosing to spend money with companies that are advancing your values.
Thank you for bringing that to the forefront. I think we sometimes feel like, gosh, what can I do? But really, we're making a choice every day of how we spend our money, and those dollars, every single one, makes a huge difference to somebody.
It does. It does. That's another thing that we forget, is that we think, I only spend, I don't know, a couple $100s a week on groceries. I can't make a difference. But if you decide, for example, that you are going to choose fair trade coffee instead of conventionally grown, I promise you that farmer who is participating in that fair trade, scheme, when we add up all of those people who just make that tiny little choice to go with the fair trade, they feel it. I mean, what feels like very little for us, because oftentimes, we're so fortunate that we're like, oh, $20 is nothing, but gosh, to somebody else, sometimes it's a lot. So it really does all add up.
Yeah, definitely. And you partnered with Bloomingdales and went to Africa to support and buy from these amazing women artisans, or some men, but I think mainly women. Can you tell us about that experience, and what was the experience like for Bloomingdales? And are you seeing more of that?
Oh, it was so much fun. I mean, it's so exciting to get to introduce folks to some of the suppliers with whom we partner, who are so incredibly talented and capable, and often have really unique skill sets that we may or may not appreciate, living where we do. And so they were supporting the relaunch of The Lion King, and very, I think, astutely wanted to have product that was actually from sub-Saharan Africa, where The Lion King, takes place. And so I was overjoyed that I got to take some of the team over there and introduce them to different artisans and see different techniques and really understand what circumstances many of these artisans are experiencing, which I think just makes such a richness in storytelling and also deepens an appreciation for the craft and the work behind the goods that supported the relaunch.
Yeah, that's great. And so are you seeing this getting more attention to the larger retailers? Are you starting to see a shift happen?
Yes, totally, which is so great. I mean, I've seen such a shift over the last, 2 years in particular, even the last year, where people are realizing that supply chain is such an extension of their business, an extension of their values. And if you claim, and you could be a solopreneur or you could be a Fortune 50 company, if you claim you believe in ABC, but then you're sourcing products in a way that is totally misaligned with that, it can be a difficult story to explain. I mean, it really, I think the desire that people have to make sure that there's authenticity associated with what they say and what they do has become more and more valued. And products, physical goods, whether they are the t-shirt that we, give away to our 3 teammates that says our logo on it, or again, if we're a Fortune 100 company and it's the hundreds of thousands of backpacks that we give to, folks coming back to the office, if we say we believe in, ABC, but then they look at things that have our name on it or are showing up in our stores that don't reflect those values, it erodes the brand. It erodes the sort of trust and integrity of what we stand for. And so we always encourage folks to think about what we can do to advance our commitments to both ethical and sustainable production to support those values. Not everybody can afford to do everything all at once, and that's totally okay. One of the mottos in the company is progress over perfection. So it's deciding, okay, where could I start that would begin to make a difference?
Yeah, and I wasn't going to ask you this, but since you mentioned supply chain, and it is such a big deal right now, I think more people are talking and hearing about supply chain and experiencing it. I know many of our clients in Pinnacle Global Network have struggled with supply chain issues and have had to make shifts, which, some have ended up being really good shifts that they needed to make. What are you finding that is helping businesses to deal with this issue? Any solutions that you've found?
Well, I always recommend the idea of having a syndicated supply chain. So being over-indexed in a single country of production or even a single factory is really risky because you just don't know what could happen. They could have a COVID outbreak. There could be, and country relations between the country you're importing the goods to and the country where you're manufacturing. There are all sorts of variables, unfortunately, that can have an impact on your ability to access what you need to run and build your business. And so if you have a syndicated supply chain, it means you have multiple sources for your goods that you can access, that you've tested, that you can turn on when you need to. So if X factory does pause or shut down, if Y country does, have a serious challenge for whatever reason, whether that's COVID or customs duties, tariff fights, that you can pivot.
Yeah, it's really diversifying, right? Making sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket, and that's in really every area of business, right? You don't want to have too much dependent on one client or one employee or for a certain task and things like that.
So true. So true.
Yeah, so this year is the 25th anniversary of WBENC, which is responsible for our conversation today on this amazing podcast. How has it been being part of WBENC? How has that assisted in your business journey?
Well, we have, since our founding, we have always been women owned and operated, but it wasn't until 2021 that we received our WBENC certification. And it really does make a difference to have that third party certifying body. Even when we would articulate to clients that, hey, I'm, the founder, and even with, our investment that we've gotten over the years, we're still majority women owned and operated. Folks would still say, well, show me the certificate. And so having the WBENC community as a certifying body that can validate those claims really gives us a leg up in competing against our peers. And we continue to be, grateful for the broader ecosystem that they are building to support women-owned and operated businesses, such as this podcast, because providing resources and providing support to one another as we continue to break down barriers is important.
Yeah, it's we've been certified own business now in our 4th year, and it's just been phenomenal. The relationships that we've made, the connections to corporations, just the support that WBENC offers is just so incredibly valuable. So happy that To The Market has become a certified women-owned business. And about that, because you're doing a lot of business with these big corporations and Bloomingdales and Dillards and so forth. For those business women that are listening and they're like, I want to do business with those types of corporations, are there any tips that you can share, or what has been helpful for you to break through, when you were a new business and just beginning to build those connections?
Yeah, gosh, getting into big companies is so hard. It is definitely difficult, but a worthy pursuit. Again, if that aligns with like those key focus areas we talked about earlier in the conversation. As far as how to get in front of them, I think a lot of our early clients I sought via networking. So I really combed through my LinkedIn, and I would message people and say, hey, Allison, I know you work in a totally different part of X Fortune 500, but would you be willing to forward my email describing what I do very clearly? So I'm a huge fan, by the way, on what are called forwardable emails. Forwardable emails are, I describe what I would like to say to the person that I want you to connect me to. So I say, dear Kelly, my name is Jane. I run a company like this. Here are 3 bullet points. The email is short, it is to the point, and it links to key resources that will help Kelly learn about me and decide if she wants to meet with me or not. So it's not a long sort of soliloquy about what I'm doing and why she has to talk to me. It's like, here's who I am. Here's what I do. Easy for her to process and be like, yes, I'm interested. No, I'm not interested. So I send that part of the email to you, Allison, that says, dear Allison, please see below my note to Kelly. I so appreciate it. And you're able to simply forward my note on to Kelly. Why am I such a big fan of forwardable emails? Because oftentimes people don't connect us to people we want to be connected to because we've made it too hard for them to do so. We haven't succinctly explained who we are, what we do, and what our ask is. You're not going to connect me to Kelly, the proverbial Kelly that we've now invented, if I can't clearly articulate to you why I want to talk to Kelly, because Kelly is a busy woman. She doesn't have time to just chit chat with me. So thinking clearly about what is the ask. If I reach out to you and see if you're willing to even make that introduction, you have to opt in. I cannot assume that you're okay making that introduction. There's no assumption that someone will introduce you to anybody. So I have to ask you to opt in. You very likely might ask Kelly if she's going to opt in to being connected, and then you're going to forward on my email. And making it as easy as possible for people who know people to introduce you as a new business is so, so critical, because we have to remove every barrier to make it easy for them to pick up the phone and call you. That means you work on their schedule. You don't say, well, here are 3 times that work for me. Well, nobody cares about you or your schedule. You're working on their schedule. You're trying to get on their calendar. So make it easy in the intro. Make it easy to connect with you. You work on their schedule. You go to them. You work on their calendar. Remove every barrier you possibly can to get in front of them or get on a Zoom with them. And that's how you can get some of those initial conversations going.
That is such great advice. Honestly, I have not heard it described that way in a forwarded email. It's kind of like, you know, how the telephone game, and then because you're relying on somebody else to describe you, right? And then they're not going to say it as well as you, obviously. Now, are you asking them first? Are you saying, would you mind forwarding this? And then if they say yes, forward it to them? Or do you send it to them and say, hey, would you mind forwarding this on?
Usually I get an opt-in. So let's say, Allison, you and I are friends and you work at, Fortune 100 company. I message you and say, Allison, I'm really interested in talking to Kelly about the consulting services we're offering on DEI. Would you be willing to forward an email from me to her to see if she's open to a conversation? You could say, nope, Kelly and I are mortal enemies. I cannot make that introduction. Or you could say, which, can happen. Or you could say, absolutely, Kelly and I walk to work every day. I would love to. And I say, great. So then I send you a separate email with the subject line, Kelly's email about Jane's DEI company. Dear Allison, thank you so much for offering to share this email. I really appreciate it. Below that is, Dear Kelly, my name is Jane, blah, 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 blah. Short pitch about why I want to talk to them and how I can, how we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. That I think that is so, so helpful. And so before we wrap up today, what is the best way for people to find you, connect with you, work with you?
Well, our website's tothemarket.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Let's Go TTM. Let's Go to the Market. Let's Go TTM. And then I am also on those channels under Jane Mossbacker Morris. And love connecting with folks, love seeing if, we can ever add value to their work, or always happy to share, experiences that I've had that have been fabulous and really helped move our business forward, or been deeply painful, incredibly hard, that I can share that hopefully can help someone else avoid those mistakes.
Yeah, well, fantastic. And I hope you get some business from this for people sourcing products. And as we wrap up, what's some last piece of advice you'd like to leave these business owners with?
Gosh, I think just a reminder that we always have to be our own best advocate. There will be endless pushback to what we do, whether it's the market, whether it's our family and friends that don't get it, whether it's the bank, it's investors, it's clients. Yes, we should be open to feedback. And if we get consistent feedback, thinking about, how we can incorporate that. But generally, we have to be our own biggest champion and relentlessly believe in what we are doing, what we're building, why it's important, and be willing to communicate that with confidence, with kindness, and consistency.
Yeah, thank you. This has been such a fantastic show. Truly, I know people are going to love it. So, and it's been really an honor to meet you and learn all that you're doing to make a difference in the world. So thank you so much. And if you enjoyed the show and you want to learn how to scale your company beyond this, I want to send you a gifted copy of my book, Scale or Fail. So all you need to do to get this hard copy of this Wall Street Journal best-selling book, go to scaleorfail.com/WBENC, and we're going to send it to you free of charge. So share this podcast, Women Who Own It, with your friends, other women business owners, and until next time, get out there and elevate yourself because you are worth it. Bye, everybody.